This video demonstrates that, contrary to the theory of relativity, motion cannot exist without an independent trajectory of motion. Indeed, not only would motion not exist, but the universe itself could not exist. In his book Relativity, Einstein states the following: I stand at the window of a railway carriage, which is traveling uniformly, and drop a stone on the embankment without throwing it. Then, disregarding the influence of the air resistance, I see the stone descend in a straight line. A pedestrian who observes the misdeed from the footpath notices that the stone falls to earth in a parabolic curve. I now ask, do the positions traversed by the stone lie in a straight line or on a parabola? The stone traverses a straight line relative to the carriage, but relative to the ground, it describes a parabola. So far, he hasn't digressed from conventional wisdom, but his next statement and conclusion is both unwarranted and false. He goes on to say, with the aid of this example, it is clearly seen that there is no such thing as an independently existing trajectory, that is, a curve along which the body moves, but only a trajectory relative to a particular body of reference. Now let's alter Einstein's example just a little bit. As the stone is descending, let's assume that a trail, a visible trail, is being emitted, similar to the trail of a comet. Now that trail will have a particular type of trajectory. It'll be either a parabola or a curve or some third form, but it won't be more than one. It can only be one because there aren't many stones, there is only one stone. Now, X hypothesis, because the stone is both descending and also moving horizontally along with the train, the curve of the trail emitted from the stone will be a parabola. Indeed, if Einstein dropped the stone at arm's length, he could see the parabolic trail emitted from the stone. Now, this in no way means that the trajectory relative to the carriage is not a straight line. It is. But the straight line trajectory is that same parabolic trajectory viewed from the point of view of the moving carriage. For the stone, there is no straight line trajectory. And what we're determining is the stone's trajectory of motion, not its trajectory relative to some point of observation. Thus, although there are two different trajectories, they differ fundamentally in kind. There is the single independent trajectory, parabolic trajectory of the stone, and then the countless trajectories generated by this parabola relative to the countless points of observation in the universe. These are all dependent on the actual motion of the stone, that is, its independent trajectory. They do not exist without it. Let's take a second example in order to clarify the point further. The motion of a train around a circular track. Now, for want of a better prop, let's assume that this circle is the track and the train is going around the track in a circle. Now, if I'm sitting at a distance from the train and the track, to me it looks like the train is moving in a straight line from point A to point B and then from point B back to point A. But the train isn't moving in a straight line because it can't get from point A to point B without going around the circle. The trajectory of the train is circular. Now, that circular trajectory relative to my point of observation is a straight line. Well, if I change my point of observation just a little bit, it suddenly becomes an ellipse. And it could be countless number of different ellipses. But all these other trajectories are not the motion of the train. The actual motion of the train is around the circular track. And all those other trajectories depend on observations of that circular trajectory from different points of reference. So we see that there are really basically fundamentally two kinds of trajectories. We also see that all these other trajectories, dependent trajectories, they all depend on the actual independent trajectory, and without it they can't exist. Let's take one more example which will prove still a further point. Now let's assume that our train track has been miraculously changed into a coin, into a metal coin. Now our coin cutter cut this circular coin with his saw, and at the time of the cutting, the saw was moving in a circle. But if I was sitting, say, at a particular angle relative to the cutting of the coin, I would be viewing a parabola. An ellipse. Sorry, uh, but that would actually be the trajectory relative to my point of observation. But after the metal worker cuts his coin, he could take it and toss it over to me and show me that the coin is indeed a circular coin, that he was not cutting an ellipse at all. As a matter of fact, he could be passing this coin out to all the different observers who see it differently from different points of view, but it will always be a circular coin because that's the actual independent trajectory of the saw as it was cutting the coin. Otherwise, we would have just a phantom coin that is anything to anybody. And we can see from this that if the universe behaved according to the theory of relativity, there could be no universe, for it would be impossible to cut any form or shape, because any shape would be an unlimited number of different shapes, and none would have a basis in physical reality. A coin is either circular or elliptical. It cannot be both or any number of different shapes, a sort of phantom coin that is anything to anybody. And what is true of the circular coin is true of anything in nature, from celestial bodies to mountains to pebbles and stones. Therefore, in order that we or anything in the universe be able to cut shapes or curves or forms, all of which are trajectories of motion at the time of their forming, the concept of an independent trajectory of motion is inescapable. There's one other important point I wish to make. Because a particular trajectory of motion can be observed differently from different bodies of reference doesn't establish that there is no independent trajectory, but rather that there must be one. For how otherwise can two or more different trajectories be descriptions of one same motion? Einstein is not contending that there are two different stones. There's one stone. But they have to be coming out of one same motion in order to be related. There must be the one same motion, the independent trajectory, in order that it can be observed differently from different points of reference and still be that one same motion. What Einstein is saying is that the different descriptions of the motion exist, but the motion itself does not. If there is no one motion, no independent trajectory, of which the two are descriptions, then what is the relationship between the two different trajectories? If there is no one common source, no one motion of which the two are descriptions, then they can only be two different motions, two different stones falling from two different trains, completely unrelated to each other. If we insist that they are descriptions of one same motion, we must be able to say what that motion is. Is it the parabola, the straight line, or some third motion? If we cannot identify it, the trajectories don't have a common source. They are unrelated, and relativity collapses. On the other hand, if it's possible to describe the one motion of which the two trajectories are descriptions, then it takes precedence. It is the independent trajectory, and again, relativity collapses. The independent trajectory doesn't depend on points of reference. It is the actual motion of the body in question. All the others are simply descriptions of that motion relative to different bodies of reference. Since motion cannot exist without an independent trajectory, what Einstein refers to as the basal principle of relativity, namely that the motion A moves relative to B is equivalent to the motion B moves relative to A, is negated. We can now rest assured that it is the train and not the platform that is going to take us from New York to San Francisco. Well, thank you very much for your attention. I know even though these arguments are simple, they demand a lot of attention. And I thank you for your patience, if you were patient enough to sit here and listen to the whole thing. And please look forward to my other videos. And in the meantime, as the cowboy used to sing, happy days to you until we meet again. The fuck? Son of a bitch.